Hi, I'm Arlena. After my mom's funeral, I came home to find my suitcase in the hall and a note that said, "You're not family." No warning, no goodbye, just silence and a locked door. But what hurt more wasn't being kicked out. It was realizing I'd been used all along. The months I spent caring for her, erased, the house I called home, listed for sale behind my back, and that note? It was just the beginning. What else were they hiding? And why was I the one they needed out of the picture? I looked at the note again, folded it carefully, and slid it into my wallet. If they wanted a war, I wouldn't start it, but I sure as hell would finish it. The house still smelled faintly of lemon floor polish, Mom's scent. She liked things clean, polished, in order. But that scent couldn't cover up the rot underneath, not the staleness of silence. Not the chill that settled into my bones as I stood there, surrounded by everything that was once mine, now reduced to 4 battered suitcases and a hallway of judgment. The door had barely closed behind me when I heard the click of a new lock. I turned slowly. No one in sight. No apology. Just the subtle message. I was no longer welcome. I didn't call out, didn't pound the door. I just walked to the porch like a ghost, floating through the remnants of my life. The sky was overcast, hanging low like an accusation. I sat down on the porch swing, careful not to disturb the stillness of a house that was already trying to forget me. The screen door creaked slightly behind me, but no one came out. No one even peeked through the blinds. Mom had been gone less than 24 hours. A week ago, I was helping her sip tea, adjusting pillows under her neck, tracking her medication. I slept on the floor by her bed those last nights, just in case she needed water or comfort or someone to hear her whisper her regrets. Lorana had shown up only once near the end, wearing a silk scarf and crocodile tears. She stayed an hour, took a few selfies with Mom holding her hand, and left with the last bottle of Mom's favorite perfume. Now, she was the queen of this house, while I sat outside it. I glanced down at my phone, battery at 19%. I plugged in the portable charger. Thank God I'd remembered to throw that in my tote, and opened the group chat, Vexley Family Matters. Except it wasn't there anymore. Gone. I scrolled again. Still nothing. I clicked on my cousin Maggie's contact and typed quickly, "Hey, did the group chat get deleted?" The reply came back fast. "No, hun. They just made a new one. Vexley Immediate only. I thought you were in it." I stared at the screen. My fingers tingled. I didn't reply. So that was that. They'd cut me out digitally, too. Not even a fake excuse or, "Oh, sorry, must have been a tech glitch." Just gone. Deleted, like I never existed. I sat there for another hour as the clouds rolled in. It started to drizzle, then rain for real. I didn't move. Didn't feel like I deserved to. By 9 p.m., the cold had crept under my skin and settled in my bones. I stood slowly, picked up my tote, and dragged my suitcases to the car. It took 2 trips. No one offered to help. No one even opened a door to see where I was going. The inside of my car smelled like old receipts and lavender hand lotion. I curled up in the driver's seat, coat pulled tight around me, watching water bead along the windshield. I remembered Mom's voice from just a week ago, raspy, half-conscious. "Promise me. Stay here after Lena. This house should be yours." I had promised. Right then, with her hand in mine, and now I was sleeping in my car 2 blocks away from the house I'd spent months tending, like some stray they finally had the nerve to push out after getting what they needed. I woke with a cramp in my neck and a sick taste in my mouth. Morning fog blurred the windows. I wiped a space clean with my sleeve and watched as the lights flicked on inside the house. She was making coffee. She always used Mom's old ceramic French press. I wondered if she even knew how Mom liked her brew. Strong, with a splash of almond milk. Not that it mattered now. She had the kitchen, she had the rooms, she had the damn deed for all I knew. I checked my phone again. 10%. Enough. I opened my email, searched for hospice. Sure enough, the PDF was there, my name on every form, my initials, my contact info, my signature next to every directive. I scrolled to the end, the final line, "Primary caregiver designation, Arlena Vexley." I stared at those words for a long time, then clicked Compose. Subject, Legal question, house ownership and caregiving. Body. I'm reaching out to ask about rights related to home occupancy and property when the primary caregiver was not on the deed, but responsible for full-time end-of-life care. Are there grounds for contesting current ownership based on contribution, caregiving, or verbal promise from the deceased? I didn't hit send, not yet, but the cursor blinked at me like a dare. I hit save draft. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The rain hadn't stopped since dawn. It fell in a dull, constant rhythm that matched the pulsing behind my eyes. I parked 2 blocks away from the law office, not because there weren't spaces closer, but because I needed the walk. The steady drizzle gave me just enough cover to feel invisible for a few minutes. The will reading wasn't supposed to include me. That much was obvious. I hadn't received an invitation, no email, no call. But I knew when it was happening. Small towns have big mouths, and someone from the hospice center had mentioned it offhand while handing me a condolence card. I walked in 10 minutes late on purpose. The lobby was hushed, lit with the soft yellow glow of sconces that made everything feel staged. I stepped into the back of the room and sat down quietly, coat damp against the fabric chair. Lorana didn't turn around, but her shoulders stiffened when I entered. She knew I was there. So did the attorney, a man named Dennis Hartley, whose office used to handle my mother's tax filings. He looked up from his papers for half a second, then continued reading without a word. The estate, in its entirety, home, accounts, belongings, is hereby granted to my eldest daughter, Lorana Vexley. I waited for the rest, for my name, for some mention. A clause maybe? Anything. There was nothing, just a clean, deliberate erasure. I swallowed the sting in my throat and looked around the room. A few distant relatives nodded politely when the reading ended. Most avoided my eyes altogether. I stayed seated for a moment longer than necessary, watching Lorana accept a small manila folder from Mr. Hartley. She looked like she was picking up dry cleaning. In the hallway, near the exit, was a glass display case filled with decorative items, family photos, keepsakes, things Mom had dropped off years ago when she updated her estate plan. It wasn't meant to be seen by visitors, just stored until needed. That's where I saw it. On Lorana's hand, the ring, oval opal, gold band, slightly worn on one side. Mom used to wear it every day until the swelling in her fingers made it too tight. She'd taken it off in front of me, 3 years ago exactly, and handed it over with a soft smile. "This one's yours," she'd whispered, "because you stayed when it got hard." I stepped closer, voice low. That ring was meant for me. Lorana didn't blink. "She changed her mind," she said smoothly, admiring her hand like she'd just stepped out of a department store catalog. "Said I earned it. Maybe she just didn't want to hurt your feelings." The words were sharp, but her tone was worse, casual, practiced, dismissive. "She was barely conscious," I said. "She couldn't have said that." "You're right, she was slipping. But you know how guilt makes people act. Maybe she realized she'd misjudged me." I stood there, silent, not because I lacked something to say, but because I knew none of it would change a thing. She wasn't interested in truth. She wanted reaction, and I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I turned and walked out, feeling the heat rise up my chest as I crossed the wet sidewalk and climbed into my car. For several minutes, I sat behind the wheel, engine off, hands trembling slightly on my knees. I opened the glove compartment and pulled out my old leather-bound notebook, the one with the bent corner and coffee stain on page 2. I flipped past half-used pages until I found a blank one and started writing. Who signed the official will? Was Mom's journal still in her bedroom? Who witnessed the signature? Hospice staff? Any of them ever speak to Lorana directly? Medical records? Who handled her sedation schedule? It wasn't anger that pushed the pen, not just that. It was clarity. I had spent the last few days trying to believe there had been some kind of misunderstanding, that it was grief, stress, old tension that made them treat me like this. But now, the pattern was too clean, too organized. This wasn't emotional distance. It was a plan. A slow, calculated removal of me from everything that had once defined who I was. I checked the time. 3:42 p.m. outside. The rain had lightened to a mist, but the wind had picked up. A trash can lid rolled down the sidewalk like it was trying to flee the scene. I leaned back against the seat and stared at the ceiling of the car, whispering under my breath, "She left me something. I know she did." The thought hung in the air like steam from an open cup, not proof, but not fantasy either, and I wasn't going to wait for someone else to admit it. I folded the notebook closed, shoved it back into the glove box, and drove off, not toward the motel, not toward the cemetery. I drove toward the house, not to break in, just to look, to remember the layout, to imagine where she might have hidden something. The old wooden box, her journals, something taped under the drawer. Because whatever truth was left, it wasn't going to come to me. I was going to have to go find it. I parked one street over from the house, cutting the headlights before pulling into a side lot near a hedge of overgrown laurel. The same lot I used when I didn't want Mom to see my car during the hospice days. Some habits linger. The sun hadn't broken through, but the rain had stopped. The air was heavy, dense with that mossy wetness unique to Oregon spring. I pulled my hood over my head, walked the sidewalk slowly, and rang the doorbell with a firmness that surprised even me. Lorana wasn't home. I'd made sure of that by checking her social post earlier. Lunch meeting in Springfield. Monday, it said, next to a half-filtered photo of a salad she wouldn't finish. Instead, it was her husband, Evan, who opened the door. He looked caught off guard, holding a coffee mug and half-dressed in weekend sweats. Arlena. Hi, I just need 10 minutes to grab the rest of my stuff, I said evenly, not asking permission. He blinked, then stepped aside. Sure, she's not, just be quick. I nodded and walked past him, avoiding the corners where our family photos used to hang. They were gone now, replaced by bland art prints and a set of minimalist coat hooks. Upstairs, I moved directly to my old bedroom, the one I'd taken over when Mom got too weak to sleep alone. The sheets were gone. The air smelled like citrus cleaner and paint. They were erasing me even faster than I thought. I went to the bed first, kneeling down and checking underneath. Nothing. Just a pair of Lorana's storage bins labeled Christmas linens and out of season. No sign of the old wooden box that Mom used to keep under there. The one she swore held nothing important, which meant it probably held everything. I stood slowly, brushing dust from my jeans, and opened the closet. A few wire hangers. One box labeled keepsakes. Most of it was hers. Yearbooks, a wine-stained bridesmaid dress. But in the back drawer of the built-in shelf, tucked flat under a stack of holiday cards, I felt the edge of something taped down. A manila folder. I peeled it free. Inside, folded twice, was a sheet of lined paper. Her handwriting, uneven, delicate, looped across the top. To be considered if anything changes. Below that, a handwritten will, dated 6 months ago. It wasn't notarized, but it was unmistakable. She had named both daughters as co-owners, split the estate evenly, and in the middle, scrawled in darker ink, was one paragraph that hit me harder than any legal phrasing ever could. I want Arlena to remain here if she chooses. Her sacrifices during my illness were without complaint and should be honored. I sat down right there on the carpet, read it once, then again, then a third time. My throat tightened. Not because it changed everything, but because it proved I hadn't imagined the closeness between us. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't lying. I was loved. It was never about the house. It was about being remembered for who I really was. I pulled my phone from my jacket and took a photo. Then I folded the paper neatly, placed it inside my inner pocket, and stood. As I came down the stairs, Evan was still in the kitchen on a call. He barely looked up. "Thanks," I said, and let myself out. The wind had picked up. Clouds still hung low, but the street felt brighter, lighter. I walked back to my car, unlocked the door, and just as I was about to climb in, I heard someone call out, "Arlena?" I turned. Across the street stood Mrs. Cleary, our neighbor from 3 doors down. She wore a long beige coat and held a plastic grocery bag in each hand. Her hair was tucked into a knitted beret, and her eyes squinted like she hadn't spoken to me in years. "I was hoping I'd see you," she said, stepping closer. "I didn't think you still lived here." "Barely," she replied, with a short laugh. "Listen, I know it's not my place, but your mother, she didn't want to sign that will. I was here the night Lorana and Evan came over with that notary guy. She was upset, said she needed more time. I remember her exact words. Don't make me do this. I felt something tighten around my ribcage. I'm sorry, she added quickly. I should have said something sooner. But it's not easy, you know? They made me feel like I'd imagined it. You didn't, I said. My voice was steady, maybe steadier than it had been in days. You didn't imagine anything. She nodded, her lip trembling slightly. If anyone asks, I'll tell them what I saw. I thanked her, not with words, but with a look I hoped said everything. Then I got in my car and shut the door gently. The sun was dipping low now, casting a gold line across the dashboard. That night, I didn't sleep in the car. I found a small Airbnb 5 miles out. Cheap, quiet, clean enough. I made tea in the microwave, sat cross-legged on the bed, and stared at the folder I'd brought with me. I'd read the will again. I'd replayed Mrs. Cleary's words at least a dozen times. And then I picked up the phone. I called the number from the legal firm Mom had used years ago. A man answered, professional and calm. Calver Law, this is Derek. I cleared my throat. Hi, my name is Arlena Vexley. I need to speak with attorney Derek Calver. You're speaking to him, he replied. How can I help? It's about a will, I said, pressing my palm flat to the bedspread, and a house I was erased from. There was silence, then. Go ahead. I didn't tell him everything, not yet, but I told him enough. The will I found, the caregiving, the neighbor, the feeling in my gut that none of this was an accident. He didn't make promises, but he listened. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was really hearing me. I hung up the call and sat still for a long minute, feeling the faint hum of the fridge in the little studio apartment above the garage. It wasn't much, a bed, a sink, a hot plate, but it was quiet, and it was mine. The soft knock of rain on the skylight had become familiar now, a kind of dull white noise that let me think. Later that evening, Derek called back. His voice was sharper now, clipped in that way lawyers get when something doesn't sit right. We need to meet, he said. That document you found, it's enough to raise some serious questions. Coercion, undue influence, maybe even fraud. If we can show that your mother was pressured, there's precedent. What does that mean for me? I asked, sitting at the small folding table I used as a desk. It means the current will might not be the one that stands, he said, if we act fast. He paused before adding, but you should see this first. He sent a link to my email, a real estate listing. There it was, Mom's house, the house I cooked in, cleaned, cried in, listed publicly like a piece of used furniture. Cleaned out for quick turnover, it read, perfect for investors, owner managed, private showings available by request. Contact Lorana Vexley. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My name wasn't there, not in the listing, not on the deed, not even in the legal narrative anymore. But Lorana's name was in bold. She had wasted no time turning grief into business. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I just stood, grabbed my jacket, and left. I didn't tell Derek I was heading there. I didn't need a plan. I just needed to look again, to see how much of me had been erased. The street was quiet when I pulled up, the sun setting behind clouds that looked like soaked cotton. I parked a few houses down, took a slow breath, and walked up to the front steps. The door opened before I could knock. Evan. He blinked in surprise. Hey. I'm just here to pick up the rest of my stuff, I said. He opened the door wider and stepped aside. She's not home. I figured. I went straight to the living room. The wall where our family photos used to hang was empty. Just tiny nails and sun-bleached outlines remained. There had been a picture there, a candid one of me and Mom in the backyard, planting tulips. Her laugh was caught mid-motion. It was her favorite, gone. The bookshelf next to it had been stripped bare. Only Lorana's wedding photo remained, next to a vase with silk orchids. In the hallway, the linen closet had been reorganized. No sign of the quilt my grandmother made. No trace of the perfume Mom used to keep tucked behind the towels. I opened drawer after drawer, cupboard after cupboard, like I was searching for a ghost. Upstairs, in what used to be Mom's room, I stood at the doorway and didn't step in. It didn't feel right. Not anymore. I walked back down, quietly. Evan was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. You find what you needed? No, I said. I didn't. He didn't ask for details. Back in my car, I pulled out my phone and texted Derek. Me. Do you still need receipts? Derek. Everything. Every note, every text, every invoice from when you were living there. Hospice emails, utilities, anything with your name. I hesitated, then typed. Me. I'll get it to you tonight. He replied instantly. Derek. Good. If they want to sell that house, they'll have to drag you through a courtroom first. I didn't smile. Not really. But the pressure in my chest shifted. It wasn't gone, but it had shape now. Direction. For months I had let grief hold the pen. Let silence write the ending. Not anymore. I went back to the apartment, made coffee, and pulled out a plastic folder I hadn't touched in weeks. It had everything. My leave of absence form from work, the hospice intake packet, receipts from prescription pickups, screenshots of conversations with Mom. I organized them one by one, printed extras, scanned what I could, labeled folders. At 1 a.m, I uploaded it all to a shared drive and sent the link to Derek with a single line. Attached are all materials related to Arlena Vexley's care of Marlene Vexley, deceased. Then I sat back, stared at the wall, and whispered to no one. If you think I'm just going to fade out, you really don't know me. The morning after I sent Derek the documents, I got a text from Lorana, just 4 words. Coffee? 1 o'clock. Maze. Maze Cafe was neutral ground. Downtown, always busy, impossible to make a scene in without getting side-eyed by strangers sipping oat milk lattes. I stared at her message, then typed, then deleted, then typed again. See you there. The weather had turned that kind of chilly, where the wind doesn't scream. It just whispers threats you can't ignore. I wore a navy jacket and brought my leather-bound receipt folder. No frills, no excess. Just the facts. She was already there when I arrived, perched at the corner table like she owned the building. Designer sunglasses on the table, chai tea untouched. She didn't get up when I walked in, just looked me up and down and said, You look tired. I sat. I've been busy. She didn't blink. I figured. There was a pause long enough for the waitress to bring water and disappear again. Then Lorana leaned forward and got to the point. She gave it all to me, she said, voice like ice. Because you were always the helper, not the heir. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I let it hang between us like the stench of something rotten. When I finally spoke, my voice was even. She also told me weeks before she passed that she didn't want a single thing sold without my say-so. She was sick, Lorana said with a shrug. She said a lot of things near the end. And yet she remembered to leave you the house, the ring, and apparently my place at the table. She smiled. Because I earned it. That's not what hospice said when they billed me for everything, I replied, reaching into my bag. I pulled out the folder, unzipped it, and slid a copy of the hospice summary across the table. Every invoice came to me, every payment cleared from my account. She glanced at it, barely, then rolled her eyes. So what? You wanted a trophy for being the good daughter? No, I said. I wanted my name not erased from the life I helped hold together. Lorana leaned back, folding her arms. This is just about guilt. You were always soft, always trying to fix things. You think it's weakness to care? I asked. That's why you never noticed when people started backing away from you. She tilted her head. People like who? The ones who saw you pressure her, the ones who heard her cry after your visits. You pushed her, and now you're pushing me. Silence. I kept my gaze steady. If you go through with selling the house, I'll take everything, documents, receipts, statements, witnesses, and hand it straight to the probate judge. You think a folder of bills is going to stop this? No, I said, but it'll slow it down. And when people start asking why the will changed 6 months before she died, why the power of attorney transferred with no doctor's letter, you'll be the one answering. Her fingers tightened around the ceramic mug. You're unbelievable. On the contrary, I said. I'm exactly what you believed I wasn't. I stood. If you touch one more thing that belonged to her, I'll bury you in court filings. I've got time. I've got proof. And this time, I'm not staying quiet. I left her sitting there. As I stepped outside, the late afternoon light filtered through thin clouds, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Derek. "You all right?" he asked. "She didn't take it well. She's not going to back off, Arlena." "I know." "Be ready," he said. "They won't fight fair." I walked to my car, unlocking it with the remote. They never did. That night, I didn't sleep much. I didn't cry either. I went through Mom's old emails, cross-checked dates, flagged names I recognized. I built a spreadsheet. I labeled every PDF, and sometime around midnight, I whispered the phrase I'd been avoiding for weeks. She didn't get to rewrite the ending. By 7 the next morning, I was already at the co-op down the street, grabbing almond milk and a few things to keep me going through the long days ahead. I hadn't eaten much lately, but I figured if I could get something warm into my system, maybe I'd stop waking up with my jaw clenched. I barely made it past the bulk bins before I caught it, the hush of two voices falling quiet the second I passed. The way one woman tilted her head, just slightly, like I was some sad story she couldn't look away from. A man by the cafe register gave me the kind of tight smile people reserve for the unstable or the recently widowed. Except I wasn't either. I tried to shake it off until I heard someone softly call my name. I turned. It was Janine, a woman who used to live 2 doors down from Mom. She looked like she didn't want to be seen talking to me. Can I just say something?" she whispered. "Sure." "I heard from someone who heard from your sister. She's been saying things, like maybe you weren't well, that you had some kind of episode during your mom's care, that you weren't handling things, mentally." It landed like ice water down my back. "She's saying I was unstable?" Janine looked away. I didn't believe it, but others might. I nodded. "Thanks for telling me." I left my card in the aisle and walked straight out. By the time I got home, I'd missed a call from my landlord. I returned it while still standing in the entryway. "Arlena," he said, voice overly polite. "Someone reached out anonymously expressing concern about your emotional state. Said you might not be safe to live alone." I could hear the hesitation in his tone, the legal tiptoeing. He didn't believe it either, but he didn't want it on his hands if something went wrong. "I'm fine," I said, "and I have documentation to prove it if it ever comes to that." "That's not necessary, I'm sure. Just letting you know." "Right, thanks." I hung up and sat down hard on the edge of the couch. For the first time since this all started, I didn't feel hurt. I felt insulted. If Lorana couldn't beat me with lawyers, she'd try to chip away at how people saw me. Make me into a fragile figure, someone to be pitied, or worse, ignored. I pulled out my phone. "Document everything," Derek had said. "From now on, assume anything can be used against you." I created a folder labeled Discredit Campaign and started logging timestamps, messages, names. By late morning, I couldn't sit still, so I drove across town to the small clinic where Mom used to get her labs done. The receptionist had changed, but the nurse hadn't. She saw me, and her mouth fell open. "Arlena?" I gave her a soft smile. "I was in the area." We chatted for a few minutes, small talk, cautious. Then, just as I was about to leave, she glanced around the waiting area, lowered her voice and said, "Your mom." Near the end, she told me something, that she felt cornered, regretted signing things she didn't understand. She looked scared, not sick. I stared at her. She said, "I wish Arlena were in the room." That's the part that stuck with me. I managed a thank you, got in my car, and sat behind the wheel until my knuckles stopped shaking. When I got back to the apartment, I boiled water for tea and sat at the table with my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened a blank document and titled it, "Formal Challenge to Estate Administration, Potential Fraud and Defamation, ICC'd Derek, the real estate firm, and the county probate court." Attached the folder of receipts, screenshots, and now, a statement with my landlord's voicemail transcribed and the nurse's name listed under Supporting Witnesses. My hands didn't tremble. I hit send. Then I turned off my phone, poured the tea, and finally, let my body rest. That night, for the first time since the funeral, I slept through the night without waking. I woke to the sound of soft rain tapping the windows and the faint hum of tires passing on the wet street below. There was something oddly peaceful about it, like the universe was giving me just one moment of calm before asking me to rise again. I stretched, stood, and shuffled to the mailbox unit just outside the apartment. Mostly flyers and circulars, nothing urgent, until I saw it. A small padded envelope, no return address, light as air. I opened it right there on the porch, hands already bracing for something unexpected. Inside, a USB drive, black, unmarked, no note. I brought it inside, locked the door behind me, and plugged it into my laptop with the same caution one might use to handle a ticking box. One file. Victor Confession, March 2019. I clicked play. It opened with a shaky camera view, like someone had propped up a phone on a stack of books. Victor's face appeared, older than I remembered, stubble creeping across his jaw, eyes darting as if someone might burst in on him mid-sentence. He leaned in. If you're watching this, I guess she finally crossed the line. He took a deep breath, then another. I didn't know what she was planning at first. She told me her mom wasn't thinking straight and that Arlena, he said my name with a kind of guilty reverence, was going to take advantage of the situation. I believed her, I did. But then I was there. When she told Marlene she had to update the will, said it was just paperwork, routine. But she didn't let her read the whole thing. He looked away from the camera, voice quieter now. She made it sound like Arlena was going to force her way into the deed, that she was emotionally unstable. She even said, "We just need Mom to sign it before Arlena tries anything crazy." That was the exact line, and I went along with it, until I couldn't anymore. He sighed and looked directly into the lens again. "I'm sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. I should have done more." The video ended. No flashy conclusion, no signature. Just a silent black screen and the weight of what I'd just heard settling like stone in my chest. There was more on the drive. A scan of a letter, tucked in a subfolder titled simply, "For Arlena." I clicked. My mother's handwriting filled the screen, slanted, careful, warm. To my Arlena, if this finds you too late, I'm sorry. I tried to make it right, but I didn't know how to protect you from your sister without setting fire to everything. I wanted peace in my last months, even if it meant sacrificing clarity. That was my mistake. You were always the one who showed up. I didn't say it enough, but I saw you. I felt your care every single day. I hope you carry that knowledge like armor. Forgive me for being silent. It wasn't because you were wrong. It was because I was afraid. Love. Always. Mom. I sat back, tears prickling but not falling. There was no shock. Not anymore. Just a slow, humming validation. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't imagining things. And my mother hadn't forgotten me. She'd just been cornered. I printed the letter, slid it into a folder, and added it to the growing pile I was assembling for Derek. With it went Victor's video, the hospice records, every invoice, and now, witness accounts that could dismantle everything Lorana had tried to build. The next afternoon, I met Derek at his office. He flipped through the papers, pausing at the letter, then replayed Victor's video twice. The second time, he didn't even blink. When the screen went dark, he exhaled slowly and leaned back in his chair. "This isn't just a probate case anymore," he said. "This borders on fraud, maybe even coercion." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. My silence was no longer passive, it was tactical. I'd spent weeks defending my grief, justifying my presence, proving my love. Now, for the first time, I wasn't pleading. I was building a case, quietly, strategically, brick by brick. We set a date for the formal filing. I went home and rewrote my witness list, added timestamps, organized statements. The same rain from earlier hadn't let up, but it felt different now. It wasn't drumming like a warning. It was steady, like a beat I could follow. The rain let up the next morning, but the clouds still pressed low like the sky hadn't decided whether it wanted to cry again or just hang there and brood. I dressed in a soft gray blouse, the one Mom always said made me look composed no matter what, and drove to the courthouse with a folder tucked tightly against my ribs. Derek met me in the lot. He didn't offer a speech, just nodded, eyes sharp behind his glasses. We walked in together up 2 flights, and handed over the paperwork at 9:42 a.m. By noon, Lorana was officially served. Right at her desk in the bank's mortgage division. I didn't see it happen, but I imagined her signature stiffen, her eyes scanning the envelope with the kind of dread you can't rehearse away. I didn't need to witness it. The point wasn't her reaction. It was the fact that she'd finally been forced to face something she couldn't rewrite. Derek's voice cut through the quiet tension of the filing room. "We included the 2018 statement of intent from your mother, the one about you being added to the deed." I nodded. "Twist the knife, politely." He smirked at that but said nothing more. We both knew this wasn't just about a house anymore. It never had been. That afternoon, a mediation request came through her attorney. A conference room downtown, sterile and hollow, with a pitcher of lemon water in the center of the table like it could absorb the tension for us. She walked in late. Lorana had always been glamorous in a curated sort of way, but now the polish looked cracked. Foundation couldn't hide the dark circles or the way her hands fidgeted with the clasp on her purse. "Let's not drag this through court," she said without a greeting. I laid the folder flat between us and opened it. First, the printed letter from Mom. "If this finds you too late, know that I tried." Next, a still from the video, Victor's face frozen in mid-confession. Then the nurse's statement, signed and notarized. She skimmed each page with a flick of her eyes. No denial, just silence, and a tightening jaw. "This doesn't prove coercion," her lawyer offered. "No," Derek replied, "but it proves there's enough reasonable doubt to justify halting the sale, and that opens the door to full discovery." I leaned in, resting my elbows gently on the table. "I don't want her car. I don't want the dishes. I don't even want the ring. But I want that house, and I want your silence after." Lorana gave a soft laugh, the kind that tried to land as superior but came out frayed. "You want to live in that sad little box forever? Fine. Buy it back." I looked her in the eye. "I'll pay the remaining mortgage, not a cent more. You took enough." Her lawyer whispered something, but she waved him off. Then, without looking at me again, she nodded. The agreement was written up on the spot. I would assume the final balance on the house loan. She would relinquish all claims to the property. A clause was added. Neither party would disparage the other in any future legal, professional, or personal setting. She signed with her usual dramatic swoop. I signed with a hand that didn't shake. When it was over, she stood, gathered her things, and walked out without a word. I didn't follow. I waited a full minute after the door shut before I exhaled. Derek placed a copy of the agreement in a manila envelope and slid it toward me. "It's done." No confetti fell, no choir sang, just the quiet weight of justice being restored, not as revenge, but as repair. That evening, I returned to the house. My house. The key turned smoothly in the lock. I stepped inside, the walls bare but breathing. The living room still held the smell of lavender oil, the one Mom used to rub on her wrists before bed. I sat on the floor, knees tucked under me, in the center of the empty room. No noise, no echo of voices trying to cut me down. It wasn't the joy I'd expected. It was quieter than that, softer. Closure rarely arrives with fireworks. Sometimes it comes in the form of stillness. Sometimes it's just the click of a lock that finally opens instead of shutting you out. I stayed there for hours, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I had, at last, chosen to stay. I woke early the next morning, not out of restlessness, but because the quiet felt earned. The sun broke gently through the clouds, not blazing, just enough to make the dew on the lawn shimmer like something sacred. I slipped on an old flannel, grabbed the box of bulbs I'd bought weeks ago, and stepped barefoot onto the backyard patio. The soil was still soft from the recent rain, and as I knelt with the trowel, something in me clicked, like a loose hinge finally falling into place. "The ground feels different when it's yours," I whispered. With each tulip bulb I placed into the earth, I remembered her. Not the version of her caught in hospital gowns or hospice whispers, but the woman who wore straw hats and once told me, "Anything planted with care will bloom stronger, even people." Somewhere between the third and fourth row, I lost count. It didn't matter. I wasn't planting numbers. I was planting permanence. Around mid-morning, I heard soft footsteps on gravel. I stood, brushing dirt from my palms. Emma was at the gate. She was taller now, with the awkward grace of adolescence. She held a card in one hand, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hi," she said. "Mom says I shouldn't be here, but I missed you." I opened the gate without a word, just a smile, and let her in. We didn't talk much. She followed me inside, sat at the kitchen table while I made cocoa for both of us. I didn't ask about Lorana, and she didn't offer. That silence for once felt mutual, like we both knew not everything needed naming. After a half hour, she stood to leave and handed me the card. "It's nothing big," she mumbled. "Just something I drew." She waved from the edge of the driveway and walked off, her figure getting smaller with each step. Inside, I opened the envelope. A drawing, crayon tulips, bright reds, purples, yellows. Above them, a wobbly script, "Grandma's flowers for you." I placed it beside my coffee mug and stared at it for a long time, longer than I meant to. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was warmth. And maybe, right now, that was enough. Later that afternoon, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I paused when I got to Lorana's name. I hovered my finger over it, thought about what I'd say, but there was no speech left in me. No rage, no ache, just silence. I tapped edit, then delete contact. It didn't feel like closing a door. It felt like walking away from one that had been nailed shut for years. That evening, I rearranged a few things in the living room. Nothing dramatic, just subtle shifts. I replaced the generic wall calendar with the photo of Mom and me in the garden, taken the summer I turned 23. She was mid-laugh, hands covered in soil, hair pinned up with a clothespin. Beside it, I framed the letter she'd written, the one that never reached me in time, but somehow arrived exactly when I needed it. "If this finds you too late, know that I tried. I just didn't know how to protect you from your sister." I didn't cry reading it again. I didn't need to. Not all wounds require salt or salve. Some just need space, a bit of light, and time. The house was quiet but not hollow. It no longer echoed with absence. It responded now, with creaks in the floorboards, soft light through curtains, the weight of belonging settling into every corner. I stepped outside one last time before bed, just to check on the tulips. The ground had already taken them, covered them, welcomed them. And when spring came, they'd rise, like me, finally grounded, finally mine. Sometimes healing doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like a woman planting tulips in her backyard, not because she has something to prove, but because she finally has a place to call her own. I used to think that justice meant someone saying, "I'm sorry." But now I know better. Justice is showing up for yourself, even when no one else will. It's keeping the receipts, literal and emotional, and knowing your worth, even when others try to erase it. If you're watching this and you've ever been shut out by the very people you showed up for, let me tell you, you're not weak, you're not crazy, you're not too much, you're just around the wrong people. And maybe today is the day you start changing that. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had to fight to prove that your love, your effort, or your truth mattered? Or maybe you've had to walk away not because you didn't care, but because staying meant losing yourself. I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments, whether you're still in the storm or finally breathing in the quiet after. And hey, if this story moved you even just a little, drop a 1 in the comments or let me know where in the US you're watching from. If it didn't speak to you, that's okay too. Tell me why. What would have made it more real for you? And if you'd like to hear more true-to-life stories about strength, family, and finding your voice again, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know, and I'd be honored to have you here for the next story. Until then, stay grounded. You deserve a life that feels like yours.